hello there, and thank you for joining me for a special edition of Roundtable here on Doyle Community Television. I'm your host, Adam Cook. This week, we're devoting the bulk of the show to recent community efforts to restore and renovate and repair parts of Pondville Beach Provincial Park in Isle-Madame. You're going to hear in a couple of minutes' time from Maxine David, a longtime beach user and also a longtime accessibility advocate here in Richmond County. But we begin our coverage of the Pondville Beach situation with an interview at the Doyle studio with Lisa Boudreau. She's a longtime business owner here in Isle-Madame, and she's also the chair of a new community group that's been set up to spur on efforts to get provincial and municipal attention to Pondville Beach and its restoration efforts. I spoke with Lisa Boudreau just last week at the Doyle studio in Arishat. Here's our conversation right now. We are pleased to welcome Lisa Boudreau to Doyle Community Television. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciated.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about here, and this has been going on for quite a while now. So I'd like you to paint a picture for me of when you and other local residents started to see that there had been some erosion concerns, there'd been some wear and tear on the wharf. How far back does this discussion go, even informally?
Well, I think this discussion would go back a good number of years. Probably, the erosion effects, especially on the wharf and around the bridge, have been notable for 5 or 6 years or more in my memory, as being severe. But about 2 years ago, we decided to get together a couple of people from West Bay who frequent the beach often, locals here as well, to discuss a little bit more about what the situation was on Pondville Beach and to find out who we should be speaking to about these issues. So we met, the new MLA, Trevor Boudreau, was actually in attendance, as was a new councillor, Sean Sampson, and a couple of people in that particular group. We met, and then we decided to take a walk on the beach to see for ourselves what we had been talking about. Luckily, when we got there, there were actually local members of the DNRR in St. Peter's that were there at the same time, assessing themselves the issues on Pondville Beach.
Excellent
timing. It was a dismal day. It was rainy. So it was really neat that we were able to all get together and have a look at what the issues were that the park was facing. And it was clear at that time that the park was suffering fatigue. Its infrastructure was looking really worn and really outdated in some cases, and in some cases really showing signs of public health and safety issues.
Now, can you describe some of the concerns that have been found along the shoreline? And I know the wharf has come up in conversation. It is not all that long ago that over in Port Hood, you basically had a case where the wharf was deteriorating to the point where it was slipping into the sea. What can you tell me about what's happening in Pondville, not just at the wharf, but also along the shoreline that's causing these concerns?
Well, what we're seeing is, the dunes seem to be moving inward. They're definitely getting chewed up at the back of the beach, on the beach side. There's a great amount of sinking into the sea that's starting on the wharf, the end of the wharf particularly. The base of the wharf doesn't seem to be as impacted. There's a bit of a retaining wall, sort of, that follows that into the channel for a bit. That is leaning precariously. The rock underneath are starting to have gaps. The beams that would have been placed there look like they were probably old beams where the platform had just been placed on, are moving and shifting. There is, when there are tidal surges, the parking lot is impacted by wave action that actually comes through the parking lot and goes out towards the pond, and vice versa when the tides go the other way. The wharf is undermined at the edges where the rock, I guess the aggregates are placed to keep it there. They seem to be shifting and falling over. So there's replacement of that aggregate from time to time necessary. It's eating under the pave in some places. So the whole structure itself is, you know, iffy as to whether or not it's actually safe for use. And the wharf is a true public health and safety issue. As the end of it has, the cement platforms are lifted and caved in, and some we see on the shore in the water, which really amazes me, the force of the ocean, really. The wooden structures that hold it in place are coming off. There are large areas where they're just hanging over the edge. It's really one or two good storm surges to really see that probably get washed away.
Did Fiona, do you feel, really have a major impact here as well too?
Well, Fiona would not have helped, that's for sure. But I think, you know, some of the wars were probably impacted by Fiona. This one, no doubt, did not suffer well, you know, fare out well. But there are many wharves that survived it because their maintenance and their construction and whatever types of mediations that were done to render it more hardy had been done.
Now, you and I were talking just before we went on the air about the uniqueness of Pondville Beach. First of all, that it is under provincial jurisdiction, but also that it's a rare beach in Isle-Madame that is specifically set aside as a public facility, and a sand beach as well too. So can you tell me a bit about the importance of this beach, not only to the community, but as well in addition to visitation? I mean, you know, you're in the food service business, you're the operator of La Goélette Pépé, Caper Gas, so you have a sense of what visitors to the area and locals to the area are looking for when they come to Isle-Madame for a visit. So can you tell us of the importance of Pondville Beach in that nature?
Absolutely, yeah. Pondville Beach is one of the foremost natural spaces that Isle-Madame has that's truly a treasure, not just to the locals, but to others too. Being an island contoured and surrounded by water means that we would think that we had many sandy beaches. Mm-hmm. But this is Cape Breton. It's not, you know, Cuba. We are a rocky region, and Isle-Madame is no different. There are no sandy beaches in some parts of Isle-Madame at all. And the shorelines are mostly rocky, gravelly, you know, shorelines. Those would be in places like, for example, in Lennox Passage or around the inlets of Haddock Harbour, where there's little erosion happening. But when you go to areas like the Petit de Gras Island or Rocky Bay, it tells a whole different story. So the sandy beaches are not common on Isle-Madame. And sandy beaches that you can get to by car, we have only one. So for the residents of an island who chose historically to stay here or who have moved here and enjoy island life, it is one of the most treasured possession that we have. Mm-hmm.
So you've talked a little bit about the early stages of discussions between your group and members of the provincial legislature, members of council, the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, DNRR. Where are those conversations now? And part of the reason I bring this up is because we did see an increase in the provincial budget for provincially run beach maintenance from $1 million to $8 million. That doesn't include Pondville Beach at all. So what can you tell me about where the negotiations are now?
So what I can say is I did speak to our MLA again recently, where that fact was made. I was made aware of that fact at the time. And I asked a question because we had all met not really that long ago in the span of time. And we had discussed our issues surrounding Pondville Beach. There was a provincial and a municipal elected individual amongst us. So I felt that discussion has been had, and that we would see some monies spearheaded for Pondville. And what I was told was that there was nothing, and that the ask, although the monies were available, the ask had to come from the municipal level. Okay. So I guess that's the channel in flow, which is something that we as regular citizens here need to learn a little bit more about, how monies shift from one governing body to another. The Department of Natural Resources, however, has a mandate in their act to safeguard the precious natural resources and spaces that have been identified as significant to a region. And in that way, we have all failed this park.
Now, it's one thing to say that money is needed to help the provincial beach that's run out of Pondville, and it's quite another thing to say that that money needs direction. You've spoken about the difficulties happening at the wharf, but I understand that you and the group you chair also want to see the beach made more accessible. Can you tell me what your wish list would be in that regard? What are some of the things you'd like to see?
Yeah, well, I think starting off, because at the meeting that we had a year and a half or 2 years ago, it was discussed that there was Crown land just off the beach that was available and had been earmarked, or sort of, there had been discussions around that to move the current parking lot, which is suffering erosion, to that area and render access to the beach more in accessible walkways, as we would see in Pumpket, on Mulberry Beach, maybe many beaches in the region that are not right at the highway. It's become an accustomed way of getting there, and it follows the low impact mandate that the province has. But the province also has a mandate for accessibility. There is an Accessibility Act, which is used to ensure that all public spaces are accessible. When renovations are made or new builds are made to businesses, for example, or public buildings, accessibility has to be part of those plans. And yet, when it comes to the managed public outdoor spaces, it seems that there's a bit of a rift as to whether or not that is part of the deal. However, the Act speaks for itself, and those spaces have to become accessible. So we have short-term goals that we're going to propose. We have long-term goals that we're going to propose. Some of the short-term goals would be, for example, rendering the current parking lot accessible to a point where someone in a wheelchair or with mobility issues could, have walked those beaches without fearing of tripping over a large stone or protruding aggregate from the erosion. That would be number one, resurface the parking lot. Number two would be provide accessible walkways that would lead an individual to be able to see the beach. Wheelchair platforms that could be, for example, I'm not the one that would make these decisions or assess the wharf.
Of course.
But a portion of the wharf is still, at this point, relatively stable. It's not the whole wharf that is impacted by the erosion. The end of the wharf is impacted. The facing of the front part of the wharf is actually the surface is very flat and relatively smooth. It would be easy to push a wheelchair if you could get to it, and someone who hasn't seen the beach for a very long time or ever could actually sit there and take, at least hear the waves, see the birds, enjoy the sunrises, the sunsets, those types of things that everyone should have access to.
And I note, looking at the research that you and your group have done, that Moby mats is one of the items that you're looking at as well too. They've been introduced successfully at the provincial beach in Inverness. They are actually on their way to being installed at Point Michaud Beach at eastern Richmond County. Council recently approving funding for infrastructure spending over there, certainly not to turn this into an us versus them type of situation at all, but you're hopeful to see this type of thing happening so that those with accessibility and mobility issues get a closer look at the waves that they've seen for so many years.
You know, we talked a little bit about what other entities are impacted by the beach. Many tourism operators have discussed with me the fact that the beach is one of the only places that they can send their local visitors to where they can enjoy sand and sea. And they need those entities to be available to be able to keep people satisfied. I walk the beach on a regular basis. I see many, many visitors there. And they actually tell me, you know, this is just beautiful. Like, this is striking. Like this, we were here, you know, I've gone at 7 o'clock in the morning and people will be sitting right at the water's edge in their chairs. They said they've been there to see the sunrise. Wow. So, you know, it's really quite something to know that that's available to us. But also, I mean, we need to be able to access them for everybody equally. And the things like the Moby mats, things like accessibility chairs, water wheelchairs, you know, raised accessible walkways that allow for the natural movement of the sand and the water to not impact the walkways and to still allow it when there's a bit of a overflow of water. So many things are necessary in order for something else to happen, that it takes a person with some experience and knowledge in dealing with the effects of tidal surges on coastal properties to be able to understand how important the wharf is to that spot and what could be done to change it into something that deals maybe better for what it is that this wharf achieves for that space. So the channel that goes in behind and from the ocean to the pond is actually a natural sand barrier area. It will fill up with sand, and the wharf assists in holding back some of that movement as well. So waves that push sand towards the other side is sort of impeded by the wharf, allowing the channel to remain open. If the channel does not remain open, the pond will flood. The regions around that area will be impacted, and we'll see more and more movement of water from one side to the other. As it is, the water entering and exiting under the bridge is at the highest levels that I have ever seen in my life. So there are things that are necessary for immediate use and accessibility. Another would be accessible washrooms. You can now rent accessible washrooms that you can put on place, trailers that have accessible features. And those things should be immediately placed on site while awaiting for the other items that would come later. The movement of the parking lot, the movement of the structures and facilities to that side, to the other side of the bridge. The replacement maybe of the bridge by an accessible walkway. And addition of programs that would assist people with being able to really fully enjoy and use the park. Maybe there would be, you know, a kayak accessibility ramp where someone that has trouble in a kayak, which most people do, including myself, could sit in and slowly get themselves into the water. That spot lends itself perfectly for that type of facility. We could do paddleboard lessons, safe use, you know, kayak lessons, canoe lessons. We could do beach volleyball. You know, there are so many additions that we could have there. We could have a lifeguard on duty to assist. We could rent kayaks there. Parks do that in other areas. it could be an added enmity to the park where people could actually have true enjoyment of that region and be able to discover the little rocky ledges and shores, you know, coves along the shore in that region.
So your group is now striking a balance between opportunity and concern, and it seems that this balance is getting some momentum because as we speak, a group set up on Facebook by your group called Save Pondville Beach Provincial Park, that came up in the last week of April. We're now early in May. It's already got over 800 subscribers now. So are you pleased with that? Are you surprised by that by any chance?
I'm overwhelmed by the level of enthusiasm and support for that page, but it doesn't surprise me because I know how many people love that beach, how many people use it, how many people spent summers there as children, brought their own kids there every year, or live here, lucky like we are, and we can actually get to the beach whenever we want. It's really phenomenal to see the support and the sharing, the stories. There is some very personal sharing on those pages that's really touching. And there's also, you know, it's starting to engage people who fall within some of the sectors that we are looking to have full accessibility for, and that really, really feels good. Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, where do we go from here? Now you've spoken about the need for municipal council to be on board, that the provincial officials have said that we need this ask from the municipality. So does your group immediately seek out that municipal support? Do the conversations continue with the province, with DNRR, or what happens now?
We have an open invitation to DNNR to really, or DNRR, I should say, to really express our concerns. So we are formatting a correspondence with them to begin that discussion. We have invited our 2 local councillors here on Ilma Dam to sit with us and discuss what it is that our concerns are and make sure that they are fully aware. If it takes another visit to the beach, it's a good place for me, I'm okay. And, you know, the fact that the provincial budget is set and the monies are available, and the fact that the municipal budget is not set and they can ask, we would be crazy not to raise to their attention the fact that they need to ask for Pondville Beach. It's monies that are not coming out of the municipal budget per se. They're available and they have formats and ways of being able to fund these projects as well as they have for other parks in the county. So we understand that they're savvy with it. They know where the funds are available. They know how to reach the province. They know how to get them on the table. They know how to deliberate and talk. We will provide them what we need at a click of a switch. And so there would be no excuse not to see some changes this year.
We have covered a lot of ground in a short time, as I thought we might with this conversation. Did you want to add anything else about this situation just before we wrap up, Lisa?
Well, I think that, you know, the goals and vision of this particular group is not to do the work ourselves. It's basically to raise awareness and engage those people that need to be at the table to have these discussions and reach our goals of a maintenance plan for this park. The NovaScotia.ca provincial parks platform and website has a place for where they place their plans for parks. And of the 200 parks that are managed by the province, there are only maybe a dozen that have maintenance plans in place, that have, what would they call those? You know, geological and coastal vulnerability plans, development plans, maintenance plans, concept plans. One of them is Point Michaud Provincial Park, and their plans were made in 2016. So that's 7 years ago now. Where is the plan for the rest of the parks in Richmond County? Where is the plan that was talked about 2 years ago with some of the representatives that would have input in this. Where are those plans for Pondville Beach Provincial Park? We need to make sure that we're set up not only for immediate infrastructure and Band-Aid fixes. We want long-term commitment for that park that allows the park longevity, because we don't want this to be our legacy that we've allowed to pass on to someone else the problems that we're facing now.
There are a lot of questions still needing answers in this discussion, but we appreciate you coming in to answer our questions and to talk a little bit more about how this issue is so important. And Lisa Boudreau, thank you so much for joining me here to discuss this at Tallil Community Television today.
Well, I thank you very much, and you know, it is absolutely essential that places like Tallil are available for these types of discussions. And so I thank you and the whole Tallil group for allowing us to have this discussion today. It's
no problem at all. Yours is but one of the voices we're going to be having on this discussion. So thank you again, Lisa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Lisa Boudreau is the chair of a group that is currently lobbying to get improvements to Pondville Beach, and you can find out more about their activities on the Facebook group Save Pondville Beach Provincial Park. Before we get to our interview with Maxine David on the Pondville Beach situation, I want to let you know that Tallil Community Television is continuing to secure interviews with various Pondville Beach stakeholders. These include former and current employees of Nova Scotia's Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, or DNRR. And we can tell you that there's been some research done with the assistance of a former DNRR representative from the Richmond County area, Mark Vandenhoden, who is no longer with the department, but consulted several stakeholders in Pondville Beach just a few years ago, in 2018 to be exact. According to information provided to me by Lisa Boudreau, the chair of the Pondville Beach Restoration Committee, Mark Vanderhoden has made the committee aware that the park was divested by the federal government to the province in the 1990s, and that it is seen as a protected beach operated as a park. According to Vanderhoden, through Lisa Boudreau, $50,000 was given to the province to either demolish or repair the wharf, with the provincial government deciding on a repair job. Vanderhoden also claims that discussions were held on shoring up the structure with large stones. According to Boudreau, Vanderhoden says that the dunes were moving inwards and continually covering the boardwalks and washrooms. There was also discussion on moving the parking lot and infrastructure to Crown land on the other side of the current bridge, and access would have been given to a walking trail over the bridge to the beach. This is all courtesy of former DNRR representative from Richmond County, Mark Vandenhoden, as presented to Lisa Boudreau, who is the chair of the current Pondville Beach community efforts. We hope to have more from DNRR representatives past and present as part of Tallil's coverage of the Pondville Beach situation. Right now, we'd like to introduce you to an Isle Madame resident who has had many happy memories at Pondville Beach and is now working to make the beach more accessible and safer for everybody in attendance, including herself. It's been many years since Maxine David has been able to walk along the sandy shores of the beach that she so loved, and a beach that she has taken her family to enjoy on many occasions over the decades. Right now, David, who was also the co-chair of Richmond County's recent Accessibility Committee, developing a new accessibility plan for the municipality, is hoping that her voice can be among one of the strongest as she works with other community residents to make the beach safer and more accessible to all. Here's my conversation with Maxine David via Zoom from her home in Arishat.
I've been there my whole life. Even when I was a little kid, I used to go there in the summertime. It's just always been a place to meet people. And of course, once I got married and I had children, I moved back here. I took my children there every day. That was nice. And it's just a fun place to be. It's lots of fresh air. The kids can do whatever they want. Yeah, you know, it's just beautiful. And I always kept going until, of course, I got a progressive disease. So gradually I was not able to go. But I collected a lot of memories, including shells. My last walk along the beach, I picked up some shells, and I keep them as good memory. And because I was involved with the accessibility committee, one of the things dear to my heart would be make this place accessible not only to people that are disabled, of course. Once if it is accessible for people with disabilities, it's accessible to everybody. So that's one of the things I know Nova Scotia is wanting for 2030, is to have all of Nova Scotia accessible. And we really need to save this beach now. I'm sure you've seen lots of pictures of what's happening with the wharf being torn apart. That's part of what's going to take away from the beach, as much as I understand it. I'm not an expert in that field, but I think we have to keep what we do have because it's valuable.
Let's talk a little bit about the deterioration of the wharf and erosion concerns along the beach as well, too. How have you seen things changing as the years have gone by? And you've obviously been a part of the community for quite a while. You mentioned taking your family there. What are some of the biggest changes that you've personally seen happening getting to that site?
Well, I think after every major storm, you see that there's a problem. And I mean, when I first used to go with kids, they could go and get changed. There was a washroom there. When we did go on, when they got older, I went on I guess would be the north side, and those facilities aren't there. I don't even know, are there even any picnic tables? I'm not sure. There used to be picnic tables, are there? But I stopped going. I used to be able to walk it, and after I couldn't walk it, I tried to just see it from our vehicle, and we used to drive down and look at it from our vehicle. But now we can't do that anymore because there isn't. Basically, on the south side, there is no parking lot. And at one time, if we went on the other side, we could go up on top of the wharf and see the whole thing. But of course, you can't do that anymore either. So if you come in from the regular side from a vehicle, you can't see anything. And there's hardly any place to park. You know, I mean, parking lot's ridiculous.
Now, I know that's a concern as well, too. I want to ask you, we'll talk about the accessibility side of things a little more in just a moment, but I am curious as to what it means to you to see these types of issues coming up and to know how important that beach is, not only for attracting visitors, but also to the general community. When Isle Madame sees a beach struggle like that, what goes through your heart and your mind?
Well, I think we've all been seeing it for years, and we've been talking about it. People have been putting it on Facebook, and you ask about it, and I don't know, there's so many things going on. You also have this climate change thing happening, and we've seen what happened in PEI, and basically that's what's happening here. But there are ways of protecting the beach. Now, I remember a long time ago, I was just a little kid. I don't know how much this would protect the beach now, but there used to be like little stalls almost that kept the sand from going further. Right? Does that make any sense? I just remember that. I don't know anything technical about it, but there are things that you can do. Like, I don't know if they'd have to have another wharf or if they just had a good breakwater or something along there. You know, somebody really smart figure that out.
Now, you mentioned people talking about it on Facebook, and the Facebook group that was set up just a week ago, Save Pondville Beach Provincial Park, has already gotten over 800 people signing on board to it. And I just wonder, do you feel that there's that drive, that there's that passion in the community to try to make this beach a better place for everybody that wants to take part?
Absolutely. I have a lot of friends that go down there and take pictures, and I'm watching, you know, and I love to see what they're doing. I mean, you know, obviously I wish I could do it, but I can't. But, you know, at least if I could see it from the parking lot, I'd be pretty happy about that, you know. So that's not a lot to ask for, I don't think. But it would be nice to have those. I could be persuaded to get on one of those little vehicles there with the mats that they have. That would be fun.
Yeah, now let's talk a little bit more about that side of it. Now, you have sat on the Accessibility Committee for Richmond County. You were a big part in developing the new accessibility plan for the county, and it's up on the website right now for the municipality. And
Yes.
my understanding is that issues at Pondville Beach came up as part of these discussions. Can you give me a sense on what you folks were able to talk about and what your hopes are for Pondville Beach in that regard, and whether you feel that that conversation could pick up some momentum as we go on?
I sure hope so. Yes, and of course it was me that brought it up, and I talked to Laurier about it. Laurier was on the committee, and he was at one time the recreational director. There wasn't a lot that he could say about it because, for one thing, even before you get something like those mats and all that, you have to have a lifeguard. So at least they have. At that time, I think it was just the beginning of getting it for Point Michaud Beach, and they had a plan, or somebody from the outside had a plan. I think Laurier was working with them a bit. So, so something, at least that place will have those kind of facilities.
Yes, we are
Coming,
seeing
I
those.
think probably like in July, I think this July.
Yes, we are seeing those developments in Point Michaud. Council actually just approved some spending on that project to get the Moby mats rolled out. So we are seeing that happen in Point Michaud. So we'll hopefully be able to see something like that happen in Pondville very soon as well. So one last question to you, and that's just basically, what is your feeling that the momentum is building and that the conversation can be had and action can be taken at both the municipal level and the provincial level with Department of Natural Resources and Renewables? How do you feel about where this goes in the next few months and the next couple of years?
Well, I think now's the time to bring it up, and there seems to be a lot of people involved. And I think, like you said, what is it, 1 week? And they've already got over 800 people. I mean, I jumped on it right away. Right away, I was looking for pictures and things to explain how wonderful it is to be at the beach. I mean, there's a lot of health benefits of being on a beach that you wouldn't think of, but it's it's a place of peace. It's almost like, in a sense, well, I wouldn't say a church, but kind of like that nice, peaceful feeling. So, it's nature.
We've covered a lot of ground in a short time, Maxine, as I thought we might. Did you want to add anything else just before we wrap up?
I just really hope they can do something, because I think it's a great resource, and it's like you don't have to be a member. I think I'd said that to you before about, it's like a meeting place. It's like going for coffee or going to the Legion to play pool, except you don't have to have any money. You don't have to be any particular age. You don't have to be in any particular group. And when you do meet people on the beach just walking, it's a wonderful, wonderful way to just, because you're not shopping, you have to go somewhere. That's what you're there for, to relax. As a matter of fact, when I used to take my kids there and they were little, I took I used to go to Southside, and I used to take two lawn chairs. And oftentimes people I knew would come up and sit down and talk to me for a little while I was lifeguarding my children. So it would be nice to see. I was thinking one of the things they should have is, I'm sure it'll be in the plan, a couple of places where people can just sit, but not the seats where you go back in, because they're really difficult to get out of if you're a little bit older or not fit. But anyway, that's specific.
Yeah.
I'm really excited, and I'm really going to try to do my best to be a part of it, just in some way. Hopefully this interview does something.
And we'll have more coverage of the Pondville Beach restoration efforts coming in the days and weeks ahead on Roundtable and Tallil 24/7. But for now, let's bring you over to a different waterfront story, specifically in the town of Port Hawkesbury. At last week's regular town council meeting at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre, some councillors said that they didn't feel they were getting enough information about recent waterfront development efforts that are still ongoing. These include the expansion of a new active transportation trail that replaced the waterfront boardwalk just this past fall and is set to expand all the way up to Granville Street ending at Sunset Park, which is often felt to have the best views of the Strait of Canso and the Canso Causeway from Port Hawkesbury. So we're going to hear right now from the Chief Administrative Officer for the town, Terry Doyle, as he responds to concerns that have been raised by councillors at the latest regular monthly meeting at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre. Here's CAO Doyle right now.
Yeah, so some of the discussion at the table tonight was with respect to taking specific items on a project back to council for approval. That hasn't been the practice of council, but certainly that there was some consideration around that. So the waterfront development project is a great project. There's a number of really interesting components. What we're working on right now, one of the components is interpretive signage. So we have some really innovative ways that we want to look at replacing our interpretive signs, concentrating on the waterfront, on different areas of the waterfront. The waterfront also includes Sunset Park. It includes all of Granville Street, right from Reeves Street to Trunk 4. And so we're moving ahead with interpretive signage. There's also included in the project is the purchase of 2 kiosk buildings. So that's specifically one of the things that Councillor McIver brought up was the kiosk buildings and the color of the kiosk buildings. And as well as there's seating areas, there's Adirondack chairs and benches that'll be installed. We've seen work on the waterfront was actually active transportation project, and that was replacing of the boardwalk with an active transportation trail and the rails and sort of making that area a little more nautical. New lighting, which was installed, and that project it'll be finishing up this summer. Some of the work, the landscaping work, wasn't able to be completed last year just because of weather concerns. That was a project that was added last year because of the success that we've had on the Macquarie Street AT trail. What happened last late summer and fall was that the boardwalk was replaced with active transportation. And so that's one component of active transportation that will go along the waterfront. We were able to advance that because of the condition of because of the condition of the existing boardwalk. And so involved in that is what we call streetscape as well. So that included new lighting, which has been installed. And again, as I mentioned, seating areas, so benches, Adirondack chairs, some waste management containers, which is separation of, which will include separation of garbage, yeah. So that's actually running in concert with the waterfront development project, and they enhance each other. So we were able to do a portion of that, which was the replacement of the road, Water Street, with the HE trail as well. So it's all integrated. Certainly there's been a lot of progress that has occurred on that waterfront development project over the last few months. So it's all really coming fairly quickly now. And I understand council's concern as to wanting more input and more information on the project.
So, with all that in mind, how are plans going to extend the active transportation trail from the waterfront up to Granville Street, eventually ending in a place known as Sunset Park overlooking the Strait of Canso? Here's CAO Terry Doyle again.
We do have an alignment that's been approved, and we have funding for that to move the AT trail as close to the water as we can get it, really. So we're working with the railroad right now with respect to crossings and a number of things like that. That is one of our last phases of that project because we knew how long it would take to do that. But we have a number of plans. So we have what would, our first priority, and then alternatives to that if we can't achieve what we hope to achieve.
And we have one more Port Hawkesbury Town Council item to bring you before we wrap up this week's edition of Roundtable. It comes courtesy of a town councillor that is concerned that actions by Nova Scotia's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing could have an impact on development within a new commercial development zone set up in Port Hawkesbury. I spoke to Town Councillor Jason Aucoin following last week's regular meeting and got him to explain why he is concerned that tax breaks being offered to commercial developments might not allow for the town to open up a residential development within a specific commercial zone in the town.
There's no secret that, we've asked for a development zone, a commercial development zone in the town. And in a letter sent to the province, we've asked to be allowed to have a residential development in that zone and that development be able to receive the same benefits as a commercial building in that zone. So right now as it stands, if you get the development zone approved, you can give a tax break for a commercial building in that zone for up to 10 years. So this is just one way that council has been trying to be a little creative to try to attract new residential builds.
So with this in mind, Councillor Jason Aucoin got his fellow town councillors to agree to write a letter to the minister.
We would like to see it as quick as possible. That's why we're going to send a letter asking if this can be a one-off.
And there you have it. That wraps up this week's edition of Roundtable. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to my interview guests this week, Maxine David, Lisa Boudreau, Terry Doyle, and Jason Aucoin. And just a reminder to our Tell-Il viewers that Roundtable and Tell-Il 24/7 will continue to follow up on the Pondville Beach situation in the days and weeks to come. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen on this week's edition of Roundtable, or you'd just like to make a suggestion for future episodes of the show, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email using the address adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Tell-Il Community Television directly with your comments and suggestions. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is tellil@tellil.tv. Don't forget that you can follow Tell-Il on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And our YouTube channel features every single episode of Roundtable, including this one, as well as individual segments and interviews from our shows. That includes Tell-Il 24/7. You can find every episode of that on our Tell-Il YouTube channel as well. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thanks once again for joining me for this week's edition of Roundtable. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.